The gate slammed loudly behind me, and there was a sharp sound of the bolt sliding. I turned around and looked at the high walls and massive wooden gates where I had spent the last 5 years. Okay, kid, what are you going to do now? I thought. Revenge on someone was at the forefront of my mind. I didn't know exactly who it was, but I knew I had to be careful. 7 years on Her Majesty's orders is enough for me. Slowly, I began to walk along the short road leading from the prison to the main street. A small group of people waiting at the bus stop on the other side of the road looked at me. They were probably on their way to work, and I can imagine they saw me being let out. They probably watched the prisoners being released almost every morning. As I approached the end of the driveway, I noticed a small group of reporters on the right begin to move toward me. Damn, these bastards had been harassing me the whole time I was behind bars, and now they were waiting to ambush me on my way out of prison. Suddenly, a car stopped nearby, the door opened, and a familiar face came out. "Your car, Mr. Carpenter," the man said, handing me the keys. "I think you should get out of here as soon as possible," he added, nodding towards the approaching reporters. "There's £500 in cash in the glove compartment, a mobile phone, and your things in the trunk. Ronnie is waiting for you at the cottage. He asked that you call him if you decide to spend the night somewhere else." "Thank you, Ralph," I said, getting behind the wheel. There was no time to adjust the seat. I left as quickly as I could without breaking the rules. I wanted to get away from those damn reporters as quickly as possible, but I didn't want to attract the attention of the local police. Once on the main road, I headed west, away from the city, periodically changing my speed on the freeway to check if I was being followed. It didn't take me long to track the tail. I noticed a small white car with a single passenger inside. "Damned reporters," I muttered under my breath, turning into the parking lot of a roadside service station. Today, I intended to properly intimidate this guy and tell him where to go. I parked in an empty lot and waited for the car to follow me. To my surprise, she stopped quite close. I got out and walked towards her. As I got closer, I was even more surprised that the driver was a woman. "Look, lady, I have nothing to say to the damn reporters. You bloodsuckers tried to tear me to pieces. Why on earth do you now think that I want to talk to you? Just get out and leave me alone." The entire time I was shouting my speech in the most angry manner possible. The woman sat with a neutral expression on her face. Then I turned around and walked even clicked my heels away from her car towards the cafeteria. Look, I was a convicted murderer. I tried to look the part to scare her. But it seemed like she wasn't just scared. I had just sat down with my coffee when she slid into the seat opposite me. "Mr. Carpenter, first of all, I need to say that I am not a reporter. Secondly, I think I can help you, and I really need your help. Will you listen to me?" I looked at her carefully. Oh, my glance should have alarmed her. But the look she gave back made it clear that she was not at all afraid. She looked to be about 35. Everything about her was in the right proportions and in its place, if you know what I mean. Look, I spent 7 years behind bars. I should have noticed that. "Okay, lay it out. Give me your speech and then leave me alone, okay?" I said, losing in a silent duel of glances. She nodded, reached into her purse, and pulled out a small case, similar to the ones cops carry their badges in. "Damn, she's not a cop, right?" flashed through my head. With a deft flick of her wrist, she opened the small folder. The card said, "Helen Caffrey, British and International Mutual Insurance Company," next to an extremely unfortunate photograph of her. "You're wasting your time on me, girl. I have nothing to insure anymore. Everything that my ex didn't take during the divorce, she received through alimony and child payments. No, Mr. Carpenter, I don't sell insurance. Technically, I'm an insurance claims adjuster." "And what?" "I didn't lose anything that was insured. You know, not many people think of insuring themselves against false murder charges. But you pleaded guilty, Mr. Carpenter. I didn't really have a choice, lady. These cops screwed me over so much that my mother would have found me guilty in court. They put in so much evidence that if I had continued to insist on my innocence, these bastards would have locked me up for the rest of my life. It's all about repenting for your sins or some such nonsense. So you're saying that you were framed and didn't kill Mary Simmons? I'm not saying anything. I'm on parole, you know. Although you may already know this. Have you been sent to set me up again? Mr. Carpenter, listen, my name is Helen. Can I call you John? Call it what you want. It won't change anything. John, do you have time to listen to a story? Go ahead, young lady, I'm listening. For now. John, my father was an insurance claims adjuster, and he taught me the business. Do you know what such experts actually do? Yes, they come to look at the damage when you submit an application and try to get out of paying. Well, from some point of view, it may look like this, but really, my job is to make sure that the claim is genuine and that people aren't trying to defraud the company. That's what I said. Companies believe all claims are fraudulent, and it is your job to prove it. I don't think we can find a common language on this issue, Helen finally said. I agree with this girl. Helen frowned. I was pleased with myself. I think I found her Achilles' heel. She didn't like being called girl. Many women don't like this. John, some of us are specialists. We investigate claims that appear suspicious or inflated. This is our work. And what do you need from me? I didn't submit any applications. The company my father and I worked for insured the life of Mary Simmons. What? And you think you can get the money back through me because I was convicted of her murder? Well, you're out of luck, baby. My ex-wife did a great job of ripping me off. John, please be serious and listen to what I have to say. This is important. Okay, speak up, girl. I won't interrupt anymore. William Simmons took out a huge insurance policy on his wife 6 months before she was killed. Although he took out a similar policy for himself, it still aroused suspicion in my father. The company had to pay out the insurance when you were found guilty of Mary's murder, but my father couldn't let it go. A few months after killing his wife, William Simmons canceled his own policy, and my father didn't like it either. Well, Mary Simmons was a rich woman. Once he received her money, insurance probably stopped bothering him. Did you know the Simmonses well? Not really, just for work. We were recruiting for Mary's company, but not much, because she was a good boss and her staff turnover was minimal. Look, John, my father always suspected that there was something wrong with the death of Mary Simmons and your conviction. Even after you changed your testimony and pleaded guilty, he wasn't convinced. And you? Did you think I killed Mary Simmons in that hotel room? To be honest, yes, at that time I thought so. But Helen suddenly fell silent. But what? But my father could not leave this matter. John, have you ever seen Columbo on TV? Oh yes, I watched a lot of Columbo in recent years in prison. The box only plays repeats, and there's nothing else to do. Dangerous killers are not allowed to get bored. Helen ignored or was completely unfazed by my implication that she was sitting next to a convicted murderer. My father, when he grabbed onto something, was a little like Columbo. He couldn't let it go. Wherever Bill Simmons went, my father always tried to be nearby, just letting Simmons know he's not convinced. You talk about your father in the past tense, I remarked. Yes, my father died in a traffic accident some time ago. In an accident involving a stolen car, which the police attributed to reckless driving. Later that night, the car was found burned out. At first, I thought so too. That is, until she started clearing out her father's apartment. In his desk, I found a huge file on you, William Simmons, and the murder of Mary Simmons. Little did I know that my father was following Simmons. However, why should he continue to do this business? The insurance payment was made immediately after your confession. In any case, it was obvious from this file that my father kept a very close eye on what Simmons was doing in the years following his wife's death and your imprisonment. You know, Bill Simmons has been slowly liquidating all of Mary's assets, and all the money seems to have disappeared. My father was never able to find out where they went. He thought Simmons took them abroad, but never found out exactly where. My father had a lot of notes on Simmons' movements, where he went, who he met. But there was a lot of time when his father couldn't figure out where Simmons was. You have to understand that my father did this in his free time. My father's observations of Simmons piqued my curiosity, and I decided to do some digging. The only problem was that I couldn't find Simmons. It was as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. I've been trying to track him down for 2 years now. And like it or not, this is really suspicious, and I really want to understand what the hell is going on here. But I've run out of options. So I decided to go back to the very beginning, to Mary's death and your accusation. You refused to talk to my father when he tried to visit you in prison, and you wouldn't talk to me while he was inside. Maybe now you can tell me. I leaned back in my chair and looked at Helen, then looked around the nearly empty dining room. Well, young lady, I might be ready to talk about it. But now is neither the time nor the place. I just got out of prison, and, to be honest, I need to come to my senses a little. Give me a couple of days, and maybe I'll agree to meet you again. Then we can talk properly. I've been waiting for 2 years already. If you need a few more days, I'll wait. Give me a number where I can contact you. Sorry, girl, but I don't have a phone yet, I lied. I knew that there was a cell phone in the glove compartment of the car. Give me your number and I'll call you. She gave me a business card with her numbers, thanked me for talking, and then got up and left. I looked after her, admiring the way she moved. After giving Helen time to leave the parking lot, I returned to my car. Helen's car was no longer visible. I then drove back onto the motorway to check if anyone else was following me. I drove almost 60 miles before I was sure that no one was following me. Then I turned off the road and headed back along the old roads. When I arrived at the cottage, it was almost 3 o'clock. Ronnie McIntosh, my occasional lawyer and best friend, purchased the cottage on behalf of, or should I say, on behalf of a Bahamian company a few months before my release. In theory, I rented this place. It was Ronnie who also provided the car and everything else outside the prison. With his help, I was able to keep my offshore investments a secret from Angela's greedy hands. "Where the hell have you been?" Ronnie demanded as I walked through the door. "I was followed from prison. I don't want the whole world to know where I live. It is enough that I am obliged to report this to the guards. Keep your nose to the wind, and they won't bother you. By the way, who was following you? Some girl. Something to do with the insurance company getting a big payout in the death of Mary Simmons. Helen Caffrey, do you know her?" Caffrey. "Yes, a familiar name," said Ronnie, opening his case. He took out a folder with my name on the cover and leafed through it. "Ah, here it is. But it's not Helen Caffrey, it's George Caffrey. When you were first imprisoned, he asked me several times to arrange a meeting with you. You told him to tell him to go as far away as you can. And then a few months ago, his daughter showed up. I told her to forget about it too. Yeah, well, she seems to think that the murdered widow might have been killed by Bill Simmons himself and her father," I said. "No, it was carefully checked then. Bill Simmons had a rock-solid alibi. The police checked it very carefully before turning their attention to you. And then they very cleverly set me up. Listen, John, you always said that the police set you up. But let's assume for a moment that it was not one of them, but someone else. Maybe even Bill Simmons himself. No, there was no way he could have done that. He would need access to my home and office. There was no way he could have planted all this evidence, even if he had gotten into the house. No, the cops planted everything during their so-called searches. John, I know you always thought the cops were setting you up, but I don't see what reason they would have. To get a light charge, Ronnie, a wealthy heiress is murdered in a luxury hotel. 3 days later, her lover and local businessman was arrested. Very effective police work. I bet more than one career has taken off thanks to this little setup. Okay, let's forget about this for now. What about my children? When can I see them?" Ronnie was silent for a moment or two. "Listen, Johnny, we've got a little problem here," he finally answered with a worried look on his face. "I don't care about your problems. I want to know when I can see my children. In a way, I can understand why Angela filed for divorce after all the crap they said in court. But she could at least sometimes bring the children to me. The thing is, John, We don't know where Angela and the children are now. What? She sold the house last year. She's been living in a rented apartment for several years now, you know. No, I didn't know. Why the hell would she sell the house? It was fully paid and everything. I don't know, Johnny. She wasn't particularly open with me, you know that. In any case, this is not the worst thing. John, I sent Ralph last week to set up a meeting with the kids, but she was gone. The apartment was empty, and she did not leave any moving address. Why the hell did she do that? This is just a guess, John, but you know she has a restraining order that prohibits you from contacting her directly or coming within a mile of her residence. Perhaps she is afraid of you. You were quite loud the last time you spoke to her. Well, didn't I have the right to do this? She just told me she's going to file for divorce because of my alleged affair with Mary Simmons. I expected my wife to believe me and stay by my side. Damn it, Ronnie. Get out of here and leave me to think about all this, okay? I'll call you in a day or two when I've sorted it out in my head, and we'll talk then. In the meantime, find out where the hell my kids are. Before he left, Ronnie ordered me some Chinese takeout and told me all about the cottage, what days the housekeeper came, and so on. When the food finally arrived, I settled back to enjoy my first evening of freedom, dinner, and a bottle of scotch. The next morning, I woke up with a terrible hangover. It didn't take me long to realize that I had been awakened by a woman's voice coming from some corner of the cottage. No amount of hiding under the blanket could drown out the sound. And then, out of the blue, she burst into my bedroom with a breakfast tray, which she placed on the table next to the bed, and then walked over and threw open the curtains. I guessed all this from the sounds and sudden light that penetrated through the blanket under which I was still hiding. "Good morning, Mr. Carpenter." "Now swallow this," the woman said, and, without any ceremony, pulled the blanket off my head. "The best remedy for a head like yours this morning." "Who the hell are you?" I managed to ask, while trying to make sure that the lower part of my body was still covered. Before prison, I was not used to sleeping in clothes, and on my first night of freedom, I returned to my old habit. "I'm Jenny, your housekeeper. Now drink." She almost forcibly poured the contents of a glass into me, in which a suspicious liquid was splashing. Lord, what was there? "It tastes terrible," I said, almost choking on the disgusting mixture. "It's a family secret, but soon you'll be like a cucumber," she assured me. "Or dead," I grumbled in response. "It didn't kill my father, although he often drank a bottle of scotch at night, so it won't hurt you either." "Now sit down. You need to eat and gain strength," she said in a strange tone. She then took the tray and placed it on my lap as I sat down. "Oh, well, what's the problem we have here, right? Eat your breakfast and then call me and we'll see what we can do about it in front of your bath." Jenny grinned. "Look, I've been without female company for at least 7 years. And now that I had the opportunity to take a closer look at her, I realized that Jenny was a real woman in every sense of the word. Maybe a little older and a little too curvy for my tastes, but I didn't have a choice. And judging by her manner of speaking, she was clearly not against continuing. When I finished eating, I called Jenny, and I admit I was stunned when she entered the room completely naked. "Well, do I pass the test?" she asked, spinning around in front of me. "Damn it, Jenny, you have an amazing body," I exclaimed. "Not bad for 45, right? It's a shame my old one didn't appreciate what he had. I caught this bastard with a barmaid from a pub, so now he gets nothing and you get everything you want. Within reasonable limits, of course. I won't stay the night. I keep this asshole of a husband on a short leash. Jenny, I'm beginning to suspect that you are a very vicious housekeeper." "Well, I don't know how many little girls of easy virtue he's had in his bed over the years. So it was payback time, and when Mr. McIntosh said you had been away from women for a while, I jumped at the job," she replied, still with that mischievous grin on her face. "Oh, so Ronnie put you up to this, huh?" I asked. "Oh my God, no. Mr. McIntosh was the perfect gentleman. I just thought that a man who has been away from women for so long like you would like some female company on the side." "Jenny, Ronnie McIntosh is one hell of a lawyer." The last thing I would call a member of this profession is a gentleman. Okay, if you say so, but he doesn't know about any extras I'm willing to add to this job, and I'd rather you didn't make it public knowledge either. I give you my word as a gentleman and a former prisoner, but it doesn't bother you at all that you're proposing to go to bed with a man convicted of murdering his last mistress. The pigs may fly first, John. You were never Mary Simmons' lover, and I highly doubt you killed her. I would bet my life on it. Hey, maybe I'll bet my life on it. How can you be so sure? Well, now let's see why I think so. Mary Simmons, it turned out, was a member of the tennis club where I was working as a janitor at the time. Mary, as far as I remember, no disrespect to you, John, but there were some good guys there. You look good, but you were never Robert Redford. No offense, Jenny, but how do you know what I looked like then? Newspapers and TV fool. Your face was covered in them. Anyway, I know that Mary Simmons had a thing for younger men. The younger the better, if you know what I mean, and usually 2 or 3 at a time. Oh, she was very careful about this, but you can't hide such things from the staff. Sorry, John, but at the time I thought you were too old for her. Are you sure you're joking? About the lives of my children, John. Well, a couple of other girls who worked at the club and I, told the police about it when they came and asked questions. But I don't think they believed us. Who would believe that an upstanding citizen like Mary Simmons was involved in a gang of teenagers? And damn it, the boys weren't going to tell the police anything. They tried to pin her murder on almost everyone they could think of. At that time, young people just kept their heads up, down. Anyway, it's time to sort out your little problem. By the way, how many times can you solve it? Jenny asked, ripping the covers off the bed completely. Oh my God, it's so big, much bigger than my old man's. Of course, here is the rewritten text without explicit scenes. I hope I can handle this, she said just before she approached me. It didn't take Jenny long to achieve the desired result. She showed care and attention that I had not experienced for a long time, and that day turned out to be especially pleasant for me. It's been a long time since I've had this kind of intimacy, and I think everything was really wonderful that day. After she finished, Angela stayed around just a little bit to prepare me for what she called the main attraction. Jenny then led me into the bathroom, where I discovered that she had arranged a pleasant surprise a jacuzzi tub, which she apparently filled while I was sleeping. I've always wanted to play one of these things, Jenny said as we climbed inside. And we played, damn it, until the end of the morning. I admit, this was the first time I had sex underwater. Not that I can say I would have gone out of my way to repeat the experience if there had been a decent bed nearby, but it was different. It turned out that Jenny was right, insatiable. After lunch, we had sex for most of the day before Jenny decided it was time for her to go home to her loving husband. Damn, what a stupid bastard her husband was. Like I said, I thought Jenny was a little too old for a serious relationship with me, but she was a real sex machine. During the day, she told me that we can have sex whenever I want. She claimed that she expected nothing in return except complete discretion, and I promised her that. That evening, I went to the village pub for a beer and a steak. Jenny said the food there was good, and she wasn't wrong. While I was there, I looked at the bartender who Jenny had caught philandering with her husband. I was even more convinced that he was a complete idiot. She looked and sounded like a country girl of easy virtue. I wouldn't go near her body, even with a 10-foot pole. The next morning, I woke up from an interesting dream and discovered that it was not a dream. Jenny was busy vacuuming again. After breakfast, we repeated the same routine as the previous day, but in the shower instead of the jacuzzi. I guess Jenny wasn't too thrilled about hot tub sex either, but we spent some time there and got a little naughty. After lunch, Jenny was standing at the sink washing dishes when I realized she was winking at me. "Not now, woman. I have work to do today." "You are sure?" she asked, lifting the back of her short skirt with one hand, revealing that she had no panties. "Damn, woman," I said as I stood up from my seat, grabbed her by the waist, spun her around, and then bent her over the kitchen table where I had sex with her. "You know, you're damn insatiable." Yeah, well, it's fun while it lasts, but soon you'll find a beautiful woman your age to play with, and that'll stop me. Oh, yes. For example, who? Well, a woman who sits by the road in her car, for example. I'd say she's waiting for you to show up. What kind of woman is this? Oh, I don't know. Brunette, drives a small white car. Damn, Helen Caffrey. How does she know where to find me? I don't know, but she was rummaging around the village last week before you came out. Oh, so she. Okay, let's finish this, and then I'll talk to Miss Caffrey. Mrs. Caffrey, you mean? No, it can't be. Her father's name was Caffrey. Divorced, I guess, and she went back to using her maiden name back then. She was definitely married and has at least 2 children. How do you define this? A wedding ring, or rather its shadow, on her finger, and 2 child seats in the back seat of her car. She was in the village store the other day when I was there. A real detective, isn't he? Well, what do you think? I caught my old father with that damn prostitute bartender. It opened my eyes and taught me to be much more mindful, I can tell you. Anyway, stop talking and focus on what you're doing. I'm almost done. We finished our business, and then I went to call Helen Caffrey on her cell phone. But Jenny told me not to. She was going to take her by surprise while I cleaned myself up. This will unsettle her, Jenny suggested. I came back downstairs as Jenny was showing Helen the living room. I followed them, and Jenny went off to make tea. Still following me, right? I asked when we sat down. John, I'm sorry, but I knew where you lived when I saw you the other day. I was just being useful when you started calling me. I told you that I needed you to tell me exactly what happened before you were arrested. Okay, if you insist, but I guess most of it was in the papers. Reporters look at things with a slant, John. You said so yourself recently. Jenny returned to the room with tea. Placing it on the coffee table, she made herself comfortable in one of the other chairs. Helen gave her a questioning look, then looked at me. I looked at Jenny, who smiled widely in response. Consider me as an independent observer and accompanying person. You never know, I may have some words of wisdom to add, Jenny said. Actually, the chaperone part made sense. After all, I was a convicted murderer. Helen could tell that nothing had happened. Who should a convicted murderer believe? Okay, Helen, as you probably know, I was running a recruitment agency in town at the time. My wife, Angela, was a stay-at-home mom who took care of our 2 small children. I knew Bill and Mary Simmons as clients. Mary's company sometimes asked me to find temporary or permanent staff for them. Angela and I had dinner with Simmons a few times, and we declined invitations, but I didn't call them good friends. On the contrary, they were not quite to my taste, a bit arrogant for me. How did Angela get along with them? Helen asked. About the same as me, I think. She said a couple of times that she didn't like the way Bill Simmons looked at her. Finally, she admitted to me that she felt like he was undressing her with his eyes. Well, after Angela told me this, I had a reason to decline any further invitations from them. That was the end of it. And then one morning I heard on the news that Mary had been found dead in her hotel room. This surprised me because there was a hint of something fishy about Mary. To be honest, I wouldn't have thought that Mary was the type too. Well, you know. In addition, the hotel was not far from her home. The Simmons family were not my big clients, so other than the usual curiosity that everyone felt about what happened, I didn't really care. Angela and I talked about it a little, as everyone does when someone they know is murdered, and that was it. And then early in the morning, a few days later, the police knocked down the door to my house and arrested me on suspicion of murdering Mary. They had a search warrant for my home and office, where they claimed to have found a mountain of evidence linking me to Mary Simmons. Well, there were receipts from the hotels, matchbooks from the same hotel, and they even claimed to have found my fingerprints on the glass and bottle of champagne in the room where Mary was killed. And then some scoundrel from the hotel staff swore that he himself delivered a bottle of champagne to Mary's room and saw me there with her. Oh, and the receipt for that bottle of champagne, the police said they found it in the pocket of the jacket I was wearing the day she was killed. And the number of my car was written down on the parking attendant's list. but he couldn't describe the car itself. He just wrote down the number. That's all, actually. When we got to court, I even thought I looked damn guilty. You didn't have an alibi? No, I was alone in the office that night making paychecks for the month. Of course, the girls on my staff said that when they left, I was still working on the paychecks, and that everything was finished by the morning. But that didn't prove that I couldn't sneak out, kill Mary, and come back to finish the job. You have no idea how these receipts and other evidence ended up in your pockets, Helen asked. Yes, the damn police dropped them off. That's the only answer, I replied angrily. I always get angry when I think about those receipts and imprints on a bottle of champagne. Somehow I find it hard to believe that the police planted this evidence, Helen said. They should have. Who else had the opportunity or motive? Well, if I were you, I would probably think the same thing. And I guess once you blame the police for it, you're unlikely to become their favorite, Helen said. Or the judges. When I realized how skillfully they had set me up, I changed my testimony and admitted guilt, I added. But there was someone else who might have planted evidence, who knew you were alone in the office that night. Who? You won't like this, but have you ever thought about your wife, Angela? Helen suggested carefully. Don't talk nonsense. Why would she do this? Why would she frame me for murder? John, do you know where your wife and children are now? No, as far as I heard, she is in hiding. I was very upset when she filed for divorce and said several things that I later regretted. She probably thinks I might hurt her. Eventually, she believed that I had an affair with Mary Simmons and that I killed her. Let's go back a little, John. Tell me, why did you make payments so late at night? Was this your usual practice? No, I usually did them during the day. But Angela was able to arrange an interview for us at the best school in the city. We wanted our children to be included on the list, and before that they would definitely interview their parents. What if I told you that this interview was planned months before? Can't be. Angela supposedly met the headmistress by chance at a hair salon or something like that. John, this interview was planned more than 2 months in advance, I assure you of that. The headmistress is retired now, but I talked to her, Helen said, taking a folder out of her briefcase. She took a piece of paper out of the folder and handed it to me. This was the headmistress' statement about the interview, confirming Helen's words. Helen then threw the photograph onto the table. Who is this? She asked. Bill Simmons, I replied. Who is this? Helen asked, laying out on the table several more photographs, obviously not of very good quality, taken from the surveillance cameras in the store. I'd say it's Bill Simmons, too. Yes, I agree, said Helen. These shots were taken in shops near the apartment where Angela and the children lived. I would say that in this shot, the child holding Bill Simmons's hand is your eldest daughter, and the woman seen at the door of the store is Angela. No, this can't happen. Sorry, John, but that's how it is. I'm damn sure Bill Simmons was a regular visitor to that apartment. There are no CCTV cameras in the building, but the doorman immediately recognized him from the photo I showed him and said that Bill often stayed there overnight. Helen sat back and fell silent, waiting for me to process what I had said. But Helen didn't like Bill Simmons. She told me this more than once. John, Jenny intervened. I think Angela told you that so you wouldn't invite the Simmonses to dinner again. That way, she and Bill wouldn't accidentally let something slip when you were all sitting at the table together. That's the most likely explanation, Helen put in. Damn it! Are you saying that my wife framed me and framed me for murder? No, I would say that the brains of this operation is Bill Simmons. It was he who benefited the most financially. He probably killed his wife, too. Angela just planted all the evidence and gave you an alibi that didn't work. You were just a scapegoat, John. I looked at Helen. How long have you known this? I asked angrily. Don't shoot the messenger, John. Jenny tried to calm me down. About a month, Helen replied. I've had my father's papers since he died, But it wasn't until I started looking for Angela and discovered she had disappeared with her children that I began to understand what might actually have happened. Bill Simmons vanished into thin air a while ago, and Angela's disappearance got me thinking. Anyway, I showed Simmons' photo to the residents of the building where Angela lived, and I wasn't at all surprised that almost everyone saw him there. I got up and began to nervously walk around the room. Angela, the woman I loved, betrayed me and helped frame me for Mary's murder. I found it hard to believe that she could do this to me. Suddenly, I remembered our wedding anniversary and that damn champagne Angela had brought to celebrate. I've never liked champagne, it's too fizzy for my taste. But 4 months before Mary's murder, Angela brought a bottle of champagne and asked me to open it for our anniversary. Damn, she had been planning this setup for months. I've never before connected that champagne with the bottle the police found in Mary's room. Damn, you're right, now it's all coming together, I told the girls, then told them about the champagne. Damn it, the only person I trusted unconditionally was the one who sent me to jail for 7 years, I shouted, seething with rage. Sit down, John, calm down, Helen said. Now we need to figure out how to prove it and who really killed Mary. Well, it was probably Bill, I suggested. What about his alibi? Half a dozen people have confirmed that he was with them all that evening, Helen countered. Well, if not him, then who? Hitman? Where the hell could Bill Simmons find a hitman? Look, there is only one person who we know for sure lied to the police. That waiter who said he saw you in Mary's room. If you weren't there, that means he lied to the police and in court. This is perjury. If we find him and force him to tell the truth, he must have seen the real murderer of Mary Simmons, Helen suggested. If, of course, he was even near that number that night, I noted. I had to give the killer the bill, which they then planted in your pocket, she replied. How will we find him? I doubt he still works at that hotel, I asked. No, it doesn't work. Now he drives a rented car. Strange, right? Waiters earn little. But about 3 months after your sentence, he bought a new Mercedes. Oh, and paid in cash, Helen said with a smile. Do you think it was money for his silence? Seems like a lot of money to pay for lying in court. Hey, maybe he killed Mary, I suggested, but then changed my mind. No, I remember this guy in court. He was a weakling. How old was he? Jenny suddenly asked. The devil knows. 17, 18, maybe. He was just a boy, I replied. He was 20, but he looked much younger. And now she looks like a teenager, Helen said. Just the age that Mary liked. Perhaps he was the bait that lured Mary into the room. He could have arranged all the bookings if he worked at the hotel, Jenny suggested. What do you mean, at the age Mary liked? Helen asked in surprise, looking at Jenny. Jenny, after I nodded, giving permission, told Helen about Mary's predilections for young guys, almost boys. Helen was silent for a few seconds, thinking about what she had heard. No, I agree with John, Helen said. He was and remains a pathetic weakling. But the hotel's night manager is a very dubious person. The strange thing is that if he was at the front desk, as he claimed, then why didn't he see you entering or leaving the hotel? Perhaps he killed Mary and decided to remain in the shadows. This is all speculation. I've been thinking for a long time that I need to talk to that guy named Curtis who claimed to have delivered that champagne, I said. John, I don't think this is a good idea. If you lash out at him, you could end up back behind bars and serve out the full 12 years, Helen said. Leave this bastard to me. I have a couple of friends who are very interested in this, but you have to control yourself and be polite to them. And who are these friends of yours? I asked. Helen had never mentioned anyone else being interested in the case before. John, don't be angry, but one of them is Inspector Harris, she said with a guilty expression on her face. Harris, I shouted angrily. Yes, he is one of those bastards who put me behind bars. John, calm down. He was just doing his job, Helen tried to reassure me. All the evidence pointed to you, you said so yourself. But Gary and Frank don't like being tricked. When I told them about my suspicions, they were just as angry as you. But if he believed you, why didn't he do anything? I demanded an answer. Oh yeah, and who refused to see Inspector Harris in prison a few weeks ago. Frank and Gary wanted to tell you what I told you now, but how did you put it then? Tell those fucking bastards to go. That's how the warden conveyed your words, and you refused to meet with me either. Oops, yes, I actually said something like that, I admitted. Maybe even more colorful. I thought you were just another damn journalist. That's what I realized the other day. In any case, it was my idea to approach you after your release. Inspector Harris and Frank, his sergeant, are looking into the case and trying to review it. The problem is that they don't think they have enough evidence to clear you of the charge unless they find the real killer. They need your cooperation, but they don't need you to lash out at anyone. Well, I couldn't do anything even if I wanted to. I'd have to find that little bastard Curtis first. Inspector Harris wants to talk to you before they get to Curtis. Will you agree to listen to them? Helen asked. Do I have a choice? I answered. No, not really. Honestly, you shouldn't have spent so much energy insulting Gary. He was just doing his job and had no ill will toward you, Helen said. I was beginning to think that Helen had a thing for Inspector Gary Harris. It's a shame. She was a really attractive woman, although Harris was probably a little old for her. Come on, Jenny and I were just having a fling, nothing serious, and we both understood it. I don't know how it happened, but after Helen asked if I would agree to meet with the police inspector, the conversation suddenly smoothly turned to the cottage. Jenny ended up giving us both a tour of the house and garden. Imagine, I spent 2 days there and didn't even bother to look at the huge garden. To the left of the garden stretched along an arch entwined with climbing roses. At the end of this arch, there was a small secret garden surrounded by boxwood hedges, in the center of which stood a wooden table with armchairs. Isn't it beautiful? Helen said admiringly. My girls would really love it here. There's a swing on the other side of that tree, near the pond, Jenny added. God, you're lucky to find such a place, John, Helen said and ran to the swing. Well, why are you standing there? Jenny whispered to me. Go ahead, be a gentleman and rock her. Jenny, are you trying to marry me? I asked as quietly as possible. Damn it, John, you've been staring at her all day, like a cat spotting a mouse in the grass. Come on, move already, Jenny said and pushed me towards Helen. How many children do you have? I asked Helen, carefully pushing the swing. 2 girls, 6 and 8 years old, she answered. Who is looking after them? Husband? I asked, trying to seem casual. No, my mother-in-law. My husband and I are divorced, but my ex-in-laws help me a lot. I think all I could say to this was, oh, I see. My interests with my husband somehow diverged. He showed too much interest in his assistant, and he didn't like my interest in boxing. That doesn't sound very feminine. Oh yes, that was unladylike. I knocked him out, and she ran out of the hotel room naked. But, you know, it was a glorious moment. Were there any unpleasant consequences? Well, with the police? No, he would look like a complete loser, declaring in court that his little wife knocked him out with one blow. I don't think he ever took it seriously when I said that my father taught me boxing and insisted that I learn judo before taking up the sport. You know, some people get very aggressive when their insurance claims are denied. So your father wanted you to be able to stand up for yourself, I said, smiling at her. No matter how hard I tried, I had a hard time imagining Helen knocking someone out. When necessary, Helen said, turning on the swing so that I could see the smile on her face. Johnny, I think it's time for me to go, Jenny shouted. My husband will return from work soon. Good night. Hey, why don't you and Helen go out to dinner? We both said good night to Jenny as she headed towards the cottage. Sorry about that. I think Jenny is a little intrusive, I said to Helen once Jenny was out of earshot. Well, I haven't eaten since breakfast, Helen said. But what about your children? I told you my mother-in-law is at my house now. She will feed them and put them to bed. She often does this for me. You know, I have a very strange schedule at this job. A quick dinner at the local pub before I head home will save me the trouble of getting takeaway. Helen and I drove to the local pub in her car. I got the steak again, and she had lasagna or something like that. After she went home to her family, I sat in the corner of the bar for the rest of the evening. By the way, I'm sure the little nymphomaniac behind the counter was trying to add me to her trophies, but I didn't pay attention to her. The next morning, Jenny didn't wake me up in her usual way. Suddenly, I felt her shaking my shoulder. "John, wake up." "You have visitors," I heard her voice through the fog in my head. "Oh, not this shit early in the morning," I said, noticing another glass with her signature hellish mixture in her hand. "Who's there?" "Police. It seems one of them is the same Inspector Helen mentioned yesterday. At such a time. What time is it now?" I asked, still trying to get rid of the cloudy state. 8:30, Jenny answered. "What a rush they are. Okay, tell them I'll be right down." Jenny, giving me a sweet smile, left the room, and I struggled out of bed. As soon as I stood up, a sudden pain in my head told me that perhaps I had too much to drink yesterday. I hardly remembered how I got home. I made a mental promise to myself to cut down on alcohol. But thinking again, I downed Jenny's strange drink in one gulp, mentally noting that I would need to ask her for the recipe. It tasted absolutely disgusting, but damn it, it worked like a charm. "Where are they?" I asked Jenny as I walked down the stairs leading to the living room. "They're waiting outside, of course. John, unless they have a warrant or probable cause, the police cannot enter a home unless the owner invites them inside. This is your home, so I made them wait until you were ready to receive them. It never hurts to show them who's boss. I'm starting to worry about you, Jenny." "Did you have any problems with the police?" I asked, smiling. "Let's just say that my father was not held in high esteem by them. I've known since childhood what the police can and can't do." Jenny grinned and went to open the front door. Familiar Inspector Gary Harris entered the living room, followed by an officer I vaguely recognized as the Sergeant Helen had mentioned. "Mr. Carpenter, thank you for accepting us," Harris said, entering the living room. "Have a seat, Inspector. I'm afraid I don't remember your partner's name." "Frank Stevens," the second man answered, holding out his hand for me to shake. "Now, Sergeant Stevens, the last time we met, I was a simple constable." As I shook the sergeant's hand, I noticed Gary Harris extend his hand to me, and for a moment I caught the Masonic gesture. But not receiving a response sign, he immediately removed it. "So, Inspector, you are a lodge brother, right? I wonder if you knew about me before, or if you are trying to tell me something." "So, John," the inspector began, and then corrected himself. "Excuse me, may I address you by your first name, Mr. Carpenter?" "You didn't ask my permission last time, Gary," I replied sarcastically. "Sorry, John." The situation was completely different then. Look, that was in the past, but now is a different time. Helen. That is, Miss Caffrey told me about her and her father's investigation. What I believed then is not necessarily what I believe now. Miss Caffrey is convinced that Bill Simmons killed his wife, and that your wife played a key role in planting the evidence against you. And I'm starting to believe that this is possible. Maybe, seriously, I asked sarcastically. "John, I don't put people in jail just because I want to. I act on the evidence that is available at that time. My problem now is that Helen has found information that makes me think that someone has fooled me and the court. And if this is so, I will ensure that the perpetrators go to prison for a long time." "So you are still not sure of my innocence?" I asked. "John, to be honest, what Miss Caffrey and her late father discovered calls into question your guilt, at least if you forget about the trial itself for a moment. In my eyes, you're just a suspect in the murder of Mary Simmons. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Oh, so if you can't pin it on Bill Simmons, you're quite happy that I've been in jail for 7 years now," I replied. "John, I can only act on the basis of evidence. But now there is something much more important at stake than your guilt or innocence," said Gary Harris with a very serious expression on his face. "Inspector Harris, what do you think could be more important to me than my sentence?" "What about the safety of your ex-wife and children?" asked Harris. These words from Harris literally pulled the rug out from under me. John, Frank Stevens continued, if what Helen believes is true, and Bill Simmons really did kill his wife, it makes sense that Angela helped him plant all the evidence pointing to you. And now, just before your release, your wife and children disappeared without a trace. The inspector and I are concerned that Bill Simmons might become nervous that you'll force Angela to tell you everything she knows. John, we need to consider that if Simmons killed his wife for money, what's to stop him from killing again to keep his secret? I looked from one officer to another as Sergeant Stevens' words slowly settled in my mind. It was a completely different game, and something like this never even occurred to me in my wildest fantasies. A wave of panic began to rise inside. So what the hell are you doing to find them? I demanded. Everything we can, John, I assure you. All airports and ports have been checked. We're pretty sure they didn't leave the country, Gary Harris said, trying, I think, to calm me down. What's the use of this? It's unlikely he'll take them abroad before killing them, right? I continued, still on edge. Calm down, John. We don't know that he's going to harm them. This is simply one of the possibilities that we must consider. We, or rather Helen, believe that they are hiding somewhere in the country. We will find them, you can be sure, Harris said. John, Miss Caffrey thinks they can't be too far away. Bill Simmons must have lived nearby when he visited Angela at her apartment. We strongly suspect that Angela and the children are with him, Frank Stevens added. I noticed that, while trying to maintain formality with Helen, both officers kept calling her by name when they let their guard down. I had detected some subtext in Helen's voice the night before when she mentioned Frank Stevens. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now I started to wonder if there was something more between them. Frank Stevens was an attractive man and a much better match for Helen's age than Harris. I don't understand how I can help you. You know everything I know from interviews we did years ago, and I've been behind bars since then. You see, John, Harris said with an unusual intonation in his voice, our hands are pretty much tied. But Frank and I thought that if we put pressure on Curtis, who knows, maybe he'll get scared and talk. How are you going to do this? I asked. As police officers, we can't. But we can give Curtis a hint that you've been going on and on about his perjury in court, and you look like you're going to deal with him, Frank Stevens suggested. Well, shouldn't I be mad at him? Typically, convicted criminals do not prosecute witnesses who testified against them if they were telling the truth. They may be angry with them, but they don't go looking for them. The idea is to make Curtis believe that you're out for his blood, and then you'll show yourself in front of him a couple of times, Frank explained. And that's supposed to scare him and make him talk? I asked again. Well, not really, John, Harris said. We expect Curtis to try to kill you. Wah. What? Where will this cowardly nonentity get the courage to kill me? We're pretty sure he's been killed before, Harris said. Who? This weakling couldn't kill Mary Simmons. No, that's not his style. Curtis prefers to use machines. We're damn sure he was the one who hit Helen's father, Frank said. And did you know that Sheila Thomas also died in the hit and run? The Ford is stolen again, just like in the case of Helen's father. As a teenager, Curtis often stole Fords. He seems to consider them easy prey. Damn it, is Sheila dead? But this explains a lot. She was supposed to be with Angela the night Mary was killed. What do you think? Sheila looked after the kids while Angela went to the hotel to pick up that damn champagne receipt you found in my pocket. Something like that. John, we weren't guessing anything. I know you think we set you up, but we checked everyone. Sheila Thomas assured us that Angela had not left the house before you arrived. That's right, she was just leaving when I got home that night. There's a good chance Sheila died because she knew Angela was leaving the house, Harris added. And you think Curtis was driving that car? It's possible. Or rather, he stole the car and someone else was driving. For example, Bill Simmons. This all sounds damn dangerous. Jenny's voice came from the doorway. I almost forgot she was still in the house. Jenny entered the room with a tray of tea. Placing the tray on the table, she sat down on one of the empty chairs. I'm not sure I like your plan, Jenny began. John, I understand that you are angry with Curtis, but are you sure it's worth exposing yourself like that? To be honest, Jen, I don't really like this idea myself. But the other option is to just give the little shit a run for his money, and I don't think Gary or Frank are going to let me do that, I replied. This will definitely send you back to jail, Gary said. But Jenny, I don't think John is in any real danger. He knows how things are and expects trouble. Look, John, if Curtis doesn't take the bait quickly enough, we'll have to come up with something else. We have enough people to watch him around the clock, just for a few days. Okay, if you're really going to do something this stupid, I want to help, Jenny said. Book me a room in this damn hotel too, and I'll cover John's back. I can smell a cop half a mile away. Why can't Curtis do the same? All three of us stared at Jenny, and from the expression on her face, it became clear. She had already decided everything, and it would be impossible to convince her. There are such women, if they are up to something, it is impossible to lead them astray. 2 days later, Jenny and I checked into separate, but adjoining hotel rooms about a mile from Curtis's house. Personally, Jenny and I felt that the police officers who were covering me stood out like black crows, but we expected to see them and were actively looking for them. That evening, the couple booked Curtis and his Mercedes to go to the hotel restaurant for dinner. When Curtis arrived at the hotel, I was standing on the steps of the main entrance, smoking a cigar. I pretended not to notice Curtis, but Jenny, who was watching from the hotel lounge, later said that he not only noticed me, but recognized me. She said that he literally pierced me with his gaze, and if looks could kill, I would have already gone to the morgue. When Curtis returned to pick up his clients later in the evening, I followed them out. This time I stared straight at Curtis as he opened the car door for his passengers. He tried to pretend he didn't notice me. The plan was for him to think that my appearance was a mere coincidence, but I saw him and waited for him to return. The client should have innocently mentioned that I was interested in their chauffeur and wanted to hire a limousine. As soon as I returned to the room, the door connecting our rooms opened, and Jenny entered the room with one of the officers on duty. He was just about to change, but he agreed that Curtis had definitely noticed my presence. When he left through Jenny's room, she stayed behind. I thought you said no sleepovers, Jenny, I said as she started to take off her clothes. Well, that was when I could go home and keep an eye on what that bastard was doing. I bet that right now he is having sex with this little prostitute. So why don't I have some fun? Oh, Helen's coming in the morning, so we'll have to get up early so she doesn't catch me here. Why worry? I think I realized that she was breathing unevenly towards Frank. Maybe they already have something, I replied. Perhaps, but I doubt it. Frank Stevens has 3 children and is devoted to his wife, Jenny said. How do you know? Bert told me earlier while you were waiting outside for Curtis. I told you, grab her, she's a good match. Jenny, it's not about who's a good match. It's about falling in love with someone. Oh yes, and what did this love of yours give us? My husband sleeps with that bartender from Rose and Crown every chance he gets, and your so-called loving wife lives with the guy who framed you for his wife's murder. You know, when you think about it, Angela must be completely crazy to get involved with Bill Simmons. What do you think he will do with her when he gets bored with her? Interesting question. I wonder if Angela has thought about this, I answered. Jenny seems to get up early out of habit. She started waking me up around 5 in the morning. I can't imagine how her husband found the strength to deal with that damned barmaid. Somewhere deep down, I was probably glad that there was such an age difference between us and no real chemistry. I'm sure she would have sent me to an early grave. Jenny, how well did you know Bill Simmons? I asked as we got out of the shower. Almost nothing. I saw him a couple of times at the tennis club. Why are you asking? I was just wondering if he hired you to kill me, that's all, I said, smiling. We won't repeat this until breakfast, she laughed. Helen came while I was finishing my coffee in the restaurant. Will you have breakfast, Helen? I asked as she sat down opposite me. No, thanks, just coffee. I've already eaten. I'm surprised Jenny isn't sitting with you, she replied. No, she is there, with her admirer Bert. He's my bodyguard, so having him around Jenny is good cover for them. Do you think he's in love with her? Either that, or he's a damn good actor. It's a smile you rarely see on a cop's face. Does he know you're sleeping with her? Oh, don't make such a surprised face, John. I wasn't born yesterday. Well, I muttered. Don't worry, John. I'm okay with this. You have been without women for a long time. In a way, it's even a relief. Rumor has it that some guys are starting to. Well, let's just say they're interested in both sides after a few years in prison. Well, I'm not one of them. Calm down, John. I never said you were one of them. I just said it's nice to know you're not one of them, that's all. Okay, let's get down to business. Frank says you should show up outside Curtis's office around 9:30. Apparently he goes for a morning jog, then has breakfast at a cafe, and returns to his house, office, or whatever it is, this wreck he lives in, at about 9:40. As soon as you are sure that he has noticed you, come back here. I was leaning over the hood of my car, pretending to dig into the engine, when Curtis appeared. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, noticing how he stole glances in my direction. Once in the office, he continued to look my way through the blinds. I decided not to leave immediately, but to stall for time so that he would worry. It wasn't until 9:15 that I went back to the hotel. Someone, we assume it was Curtis, called the front desk and asked if you were staying here, Bert said when he joined Helen and me in my room immediately after my return. He came in from Jenny's room, so I assumed he had the key because Jenny herself was still downstairs in the lounge. Did they tell him? Yes, the guy at the reception who was with the girl is my partner. We need Curtis to think he knows everything. Suddenly, Bert's cell phone rang, and he went to Jenny's room to answer the call. He returned a couple of minutes later. Curtis went by car out of town. The boss I assumed he was talking about, Gary Harris, said he took off right after you left. He watched you for a while, probably to make sure you were really back here, and then he sped off along the road to London. The boss hopes he's heading to where Simmons lives. We didn't hear anything for the next 2 hours. Bert came downstairs and Helen and I sat and talked, mostly about her and my children. She told me more about how she discovered her husband was cheating on her with his assistant, and how long it probably went on before she became suspicious. Then Helen and I went down for lunch. While we were eating, I noticed Bert taking a call on his cell phone. It was immediately clear from his gestures that the news was not the best. As we finished lunch, Jenny, who also looked worried, caught my eye and then nodded upward. I realized that a conversation was required in my room. Helen and I left the restaurant first and were already waiting in the room when Jenny came in alone. They missed him in that damn one-way system in Richmond, she told us. Frank told Bert that they were sure he was heading to where Simmons and Angela were hiding. Are they sure he didn't notice them? I asked. Yes, according to Frank, they were just stuck in traffic. Richmond can be a real thorn in one place sometimes. Well, in that case, maybe Curtis was just out on business. No, he doesn't have anything planned for today, and no one called him this morning, Jenny answered. How do they know this? I asked. Gary and Frank are playing with fire, John, Helen said. They broke the rules a little, so please don't ask how they managed to get this information. If they are caught, they will both be in big trouble. Wow, good Inspector Harris is breaking the rules, I commented. Don't be so sarcastic, John. I told you Gary and Frank really want to catch Simmons. Helen reproached me. No, they want to be sure that they put the right person in prison the first time. It probably pisses them off that they could have been fooled, but I'm sure they would prefer it if it turned out that they were right in sending me to jail. It's a pity that they will be disappointed. You know, you're a cynic, John. Has anyone told you about this? Helen said, slightly annoyed. What did you expect? I spent 7 years in prison because these guys didn't do their job properly. Believe me, they are now risking their necks for you. So please show a little gratitude, Helen said, and then we both fell silent. I was sure that Helen was angry with me for my feelings for Gary and Frank. But over the course of 7 years, I convinced myself that they imprisoned me unfairly. You can't get rid of that kind of hatred overnight. The day dragged on boringly, despite the fact that I was sitting in a room with, in my opinion, a beautiful woman. It's a pity we weren't in bed, but it seemed to me that Helen's sympathies were directed in a different direction. We watched TV and drank coffee endlessly until 7 in the evening, when we started discussing dinner. Helen had just gone to Jenny's room so I could shower and change, but soon returned with Jenny and Bert. "The boss thinks something is up," Bert said as he entered the room. They found Curtis's Mercedes parked on a street near Twickenham station, but Curtis himself is not there. "And what does this prove?" I asked. "Someone stole a Mondio Gia from a parking lot in Richmond 2 hours ago. It's just 2 train stops from Twickenham. And guess what? This car is now parked at a station nearby. One of our guys just noticed her. So what now? There's no one in the car, so Inspector Harris believes the driver is keeping an eye on the hotel, waiting for you to go out on foot somewhere. But don't worry, we'll catch him when he shows up. I don't see how this will help. If it was Curtis and he was going to run me over, you can't prove he was planning to kill me. Better tell Harris to let him try." "Are you crazy, John? He can kill you," Jenny screamed. "Jenny's right, John. It's too dangerous," Helen joined her. "I don't think the boss would approve, John," Bert added. "Then I don't see the point in all this comedy. Call Harris and tell him I told his guys to stay away until the attempt is made. It's not that I didn't know what would happen. Harris can call me on my cell phone and let me know when the car starts moving. I'll wait for that bastard." Bert called Harris, who initially disagreed. But then I snatched the phone from Bert, and after much arguing, he admitted that my idea, although extremely dangerous, was the best possible. After I quipped about spending the last 7 years among psychopaths, Harris gave in. However, he warned that if I got hurt, it would be on my conscience. I didn't have dinner with Helen at the hotel. Instead, I went to the White Hart, a pub about a quarter of a mile away, and had dinner there alone. There was no point in putting anyone else in danger. According to the plan, Bert and his partner were to drive up to the pub to observe the situation. But when they arrived, Jenny was with them. We pretended not to know each other and sat on opposite sides of the bar. The pub was quite crowded, and a couple of times during the evening people sat down at my table. One guy even started a conversation with me, but nothing unusual happened. By 11 o'clock, they decided to close the pub, but Harris never called to say the car had moved. So I went to the toilet and called him myself. "It looks like nothing will happen, John. You can go back to the hotel," Gary suggested. As I came out of the restroom, I noticed Bert talking on his cell phone and realized he was talking to Gary or Frank. Our eyes met for a second, and that was enough for me to understand. He knows that I am going home. We couldn't communicate in case someone was watching me. They finished their drinks and left the bar before me. When I went outside, I saw 3 of them near the car. They were talking. In my opinion, no one would have guessed that they were police. I walked home alone on the empty sidewalk. I think I had walked about 50 yards when I heard a car start, presumably Bert's car. But for some reason, I immediately realized that something was wrong. Then it dawned on me. The car I heard behind me started moving, but not in reverse. Bert would have to back up to get out of the parking lot. The sound grew louder, too loud. This thing is coming straight at me, I thought. Then a car horn sounded in the distance, and I realized that Bert had spotted the car I had heard. I turned around just in time to see a car with its headlights off drive onto the sidewalk. He was 15 or 20 yards away and heading straight for me. Turning around, I realized that I had nowhere to go. There was a blank wall nearby, with no doors or anything to dive into. At any second, the car could hit me, and I could not do anything about it. The car was 15 to 20 yards away and heading straight towards me. Turning around, I realized that I had nowhere to go. There was a blank wall nearby, without doorways or shelters. At any second, the car could hit me, and I could not do anything about it. I don't know if it's the sudden surge of adrenaline in the brain, but in moments like the one I found myself in, time seems to slow down. I saw the car rushing towards me, and I even remember thinking that I couldn't see who was driving, it was too dark. For a moment, the thought flashed through my mind, what if I jumped to the side right before the car hit me? But it immediately became clear that this was not an accident. The driver could just turn the steering wheel slightly and run over me, even if I fell to the ground, or stop and run over me in reverse. God knows where I got the idea to jump over the car. But when the car approached, I took a couple of steps towards it and jumped up. My memory is a little fuzzy, but I'm pretty sure I landed with one foot on the hood, trying to push off to jump higher. But the car was going so fast that I was spun in the air. I remember hitting my shoulder on the roof of the car, rolling onto my side, and then sliding off the back of the car, hitting the trunk. The next thing I remember was I was lying on the ground with Jenny leaning over me. "John, are you hurt badly?" she asked with a worried face. I moved my fingers and toes. Everything seemed to be working as it should, but I felt like I hit my shoulder hard, most likely when I first landed on the roof of the car. Nothing seemed to be broken. Carefully, I rose up, despite Jenny's urges to remain lying down. "Damn, Jen, I think I got lucky," I said, dumbfounded. "You know, for a moment I thought I was finished. Where's Bert? They chased the car that hit you. Oh, here comes the ambulance." "I don't need an ambulance. Everything's fine, just a couple of bruises." "John, you were unconscious for about 5 minutes, and you have a big bump on the back of your head. You're going to the hospital whether you like it or not." Jenny turned on her caring mommy mode, and I was unable to object to her. I may have passed out again because the ambulance ride is a hazy memory. The next thing I remember is I'm in the hospital waiting room. There they examined me from head to toe. They did an X-ray and a bunch of other procedures. As a result, the diagnosis was made a mild concussion. Christ, the hospital medical staff examined me thoroughly. X-ray, and it seems everything you can think of. After a lot of manipulation, tugging and moving me from place to place, they treated a few minor abrasions and diagnosed a concussion, a mild concussion, to be precise, as they put it. What the hell happened? I asked Jenny when I finally started to come to my senses. I thought Harris said that the car wasn't moving. "Looks like she really didn't move," Jenny answered. "It was a completely different car. According to the special constable, almost every available police officer in the area is now busy searching for her." "What? They lost the damn car?" "Well, we guess so. She was out of sight before Bert had even left the pub car park," Jenny answered. Helen, who had been silent until then, was sitting on the other side of the bed, and I suddenly realized that she was holding my hand. More precisely, I realized this only when I tried to scratch my nose and discovered that I did not have a free hand. Jenny held my other hand. This was a serious dilemma for me. Which hand should I use to scratch my nose? After a couple of minutes of thinking, I decided that it would be better if my nose itches. It distracted me from other pains and a terrible headache. I didn't want to offend any of the women. I'm caring, aren't I? Then a doctor and a nurse entered the room. It seems that the doctor was the same person who supervised my treatment earlier. "Sorry, ladies, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the patient alone. The best treatment for a concussion is rest and sleep. Now we'll give him a sedative." Great, I thought. I'm a fucking patient, and he's telling the girls what he's going to do to me without even asking if I want the sedative. I later learned that I was much more inadequate than I thought and was what the staff politely called a difficult patient. It turns out that I assured everyone that I was fine and that I was going home. I'm not sure the sedative worked as the doctor expected. Perhaps there was too much adrenaline in my body and it interfered with the expected effect. I woke up several times during the night when nurses came to check on me, and this damn peak, peak, peak from the devices they connected me to was simply driving me crazy. At some point, I thought I heard loud voices. I think it was Helen and Jenny's voices, and I got the distinct impression that they were interrogating Gary Harris mercilessly. But then I heard a woman's voice telling them to be quiet, and after that there was silence. I must have fallen into a deep sleep again. I had strange dreams about this car flying towards me. In them, I again tried to make out the driver's face, but it was too dark. Then I dreamed that I was moving, my bed was moving, and I heard voices, but I could not understand anything that was said. There were bright lights and strange buzzing sounds all around, which I perceived through my closed eyelids, but could not open my eyes to see what was happening. When I finally woke up, I immediately realized that I was in a completely different room. And to make life even more interesting, hanging right in front of my face was the most impressive pair of breasts I'd seen in years, neatly packaged in a nurse's uniform. Although that may not be true, Jenny also has impressive breasts. In any case, it's not every morning you wake up with such a view in front of your eyes. Well, especially when you spent 7 years in prison. The nurse was fiddling with something above the head of the bed. I don't know why I did it, perhaps because of a demonic character, or because I was crazy from the medications. This is my excuse. I lifted my head slightly, enough to bring my face closer to one of these beauties, and lightly bit her. Moon, the nurse screamed and jumped back. Oh, he woke up. Jenny's voice came from somewhere in the room at the same moment when the nurse retreated and allowed me to see Helen sitting in a chair by the bed. Oops, very bad timing, John. There are 2 women in the room who really care about you, and you decide to bite the third one. Mr. Smith, said the nurse with a reproachful, but at the same time laughing tone. This is our John. What did he do? Bite you? Jenny asked. Yeah, cheeky guy, the nurse answered, still laughing. Like this, there was no point in tempting John. With such a figure, I'm sure many patients appreciate you, said Helen. This struck me as something out of character for Helen. They usually try to grab them, not eat them, damn it. The nurse continued to laugh. Sorry, I thought you were someone else, I said, trying to make amends. If you think we'll believe that, you're sadly mistaken, you horny bastard, said Jenny. Better warn the other nurses to be careful around this guy. How are you feeling, John? Helen asked, now standing over me. How crap. What the hell happened? You had brain swelling due to a blow to the head. You've been unconscious for over a week, Helen said with concern in her voice. I glanced at Jenny, who was now standing next to the bed. I had a hard time understanding what she was trying to say with her eyes and eyebrows. She looked in Helen's direction, raised her eyebrows, and at the same time made some stupid faces. There was some kind of hint there, I knew it, but I'll be damned if I figured out which one it was. The nurse left the room, but soon returned with the doctor, who pushed Helen and Jenny out the door before he and the nurse put me to the real test, both physically and mentally. So, Mr. Smith, I think it's best for you to spend another day or 2 in bed to make sure that everything has finally stabilized. And then you can go home. But please lead a quiet life for a while, the doctor said before he and the nurse left the room. Helen and Jenny returned almost immediately, this time accompanied by Ronnie. Ronnie was the first to speak. What the hell were you thinking, John, allowing yourself to be dragged into this shit like that? You know, I'm sure we have every reason to sue the police for getting you involved in this stupid operation. $500,000 is the minimum, and if you play the role of the wounded hero longer, you can squeeze out more. Ronnie's legal mind was already working with all its might. No, Ronnie, no one will sue. This, in part, was my idea to try to lure out whoever was behind this. It was just bad luck that they lost the car, that's all. By the way, what's wrong with the car? She was found burned, like the previous ones, Helen answered. John, it looks like someone really wanted to hurt you. Gary believes the Ford Mondeo hijacking in Richmond was a diversion to get police to shift their attention. The car that hit you was stolen a few weeks before you got out of prison. Believe it or not, she was caught on camera on the A40 on the morning of your release. Interesting. Gary thinks they were planning to attack me right outside the prison, I asked. He didn't say this directly, but it would be an extremely stupid idea with all the crowd of journalists at the gate, Helen suggested. Perhaps that's why they didn't try that day, I said. Anyway, Gary has arranged for you to be transferred to this private unit, and there are 2 armed police officers stationed outside your room at all times, Helen said. Does this have anything to do with why everyone calls me Mr. Smith? Yeah, sorry, that was the first name that came to mind the night the accident happened, Jenny said. I tried to think ahead. I admit, at first I thought about journalists, but Gary said it would be better to keep you incognito. You know, in case Simmons tries to find you. Jenny and Helen, who seemed to have taken turns watching my bed while I was unconscious, told me that Curtis was under police surveillance at the time the assassination attempt took place. However, the police were confident that he was the one who stole the Mondio Gia they were tracking that evening. So, according to Gary Harris and his partner Frank, Curtis knew that the assassination attempt on me was planned for that evening. Harris questioned Curtis about his movements that day, but they had no evidence on him, only guesses and suspicions. The guy didn't even flinch when he was detained. Curtis also stated that he did not see me near his office. I don't know why it didn't occur to Harris that Curtis might have been in contact with Simmons on his cell phone. Most likely, this is how they communicated. Harris ordered that Curtis's registered cell phone be tracked. All calls and location data were recorded. But even then, it was pretty easy to get an untraceable cell phone just as it is now, if you know where to look. So it was still possible that Curtis had a second phone. The next morning, Harris and Frank came and confirmed that they were continuing to track. They were never able to find out where Bill Simmons, Angela, and my children were. They believed that making a public fuss and putting them on the wanted list was not the best idea because no one knew how Simmons would react to this. I think we should get him to try to get to me again, I suggested. No way. Damn, it was only a miracle you survived last time, Harris countered. Listen, the bastard beat us to it last time. Now I'll be ready. Besides, if the car was stolen before I was released, that means he was going to deal with me anyway. And I don't intend to look over my shoulder for the rest of my days. That makes sense, Harris said. I can only keep a guard around you for a limited time. Someone will start asking questions about recycling. What are you up to, John? The same as the first time, but on my terms. I'll put pressure on Curtis, but without your people on my tail. What do you mean by pressure? Inspector, you stuck me in a cell with the most notorious scum. But I made a couple of friends there and did some favors for them. Now I think I can use their help. But I need your guys not to interfere. After much deliberation, Harris and Frank agreed to let go of the reins, but insisted that security remain at my room and that panic buttons be installed in the cottage. I didn't tell them that I wasn't going back there anytime soon. After Harris and Frank left, Jenny returned to the room. I realized that I was thinking too much about myself and completely forgot about her. Jenny, were you here in the hospital the whole time I was unconscious? Almost all the time, yes. I needed to make sure they were taking good care of my boy, she replied. What about your husband? He's probably furious that you're spending so much time here. To hell with it. He's already in the past. I found him with this little prostitute in our bed. I hope you don't mind, but I moved into one of the spare rooms in the cottage. Helen helped me. Mr. McIntosh said that was normal. Of course, that's normal. I think you got rid of him and did the right thing. Now kiss me and call Ronnie to get his ass over here. I have some errands for him before I get out of here. Helen stopped by later, but couldn't stay long. She had to work. Ronnie arrived around 3. I asked him to get $5,000 in cash and another car. Then I asked him to make a will for me. Well, not exactly a will. On paper, I was practically bankrupt. But I made it clear to him that if I didn't get out, he had to divide my money into 3 parts, a third each for Jenny, Helen, and my children. Of course, after he takes his commission, the children should not receive a penny until there is no longer the slightest chance that Angela can get to them. I also asked Ronnie to make a few calls, preferably on a reliable line. Ronnie got the hint, so I was confident that the calls would be made from a phone that could not be traced back to him or me. 3 more days passed before the doctors finally designed to discharge me from the hospital. I left her in the comfort of the van's laundry room. Although the police were sure that no one was watching the hospital, I decided not to risk it. Helen and Jenny picked me up at a pre-arranged location on the road. They then took me to another, quite luxurious hotel. Later that evening, after I had insisted that both women leave, I had company over. Three rather large guys came into my room. Discussing my problem over a couple of drinks, the guys came up with a simple plan to get Curtis alone. They would simply hire him as a driver and then capture him in a suitable secluded location. After a couple of calls, they even found a suitable place for our conversation, a warehouse in East London on the riverbank. "There's a doorway right above the water," one of the guys said. "All you have to do is start talking about tides and the bodies that wash up on the open sea, and these bastards immediately give up." "Have you done this before?" I asked casually, rather than keep the conversation going. "Yes, but throwing bodies into the Thames is not very smart. The damn things have been hanging around there too long, being dragged back and forth by the tide. And in general, now they are trying to clean the river and not pollute it. You know, salmon were found here last year, and scientists hope they will start spawning here again." Quite a surreal conversation, I thought, about the downsides of polluting the Thames with dead people dumped there. But as it turned out, the guy was an avid fisherman. I wonder where they got rid of the bodies anyway. They seemed to be well versed in this matter. We spent the rest of the evening talking about old times and how the guys were doing on the outside. They left only after 4 in the morning, I think only because the alcohol ran out. Of course, when I woke up the next day, I needed one of Jenny's mixes again. She came into my room early in the morning, noticed the empty whiskey bottles, and immediately went looking for the necessary ingredients. After she insisted I eat brunch in the room, Jenny decided it was time for me to take a shower, and we played for a bit. This woman almost killed me then. She said that she was used to a lot of sex and missed me a lot. Although, to tell the truth, she missed, rather, a certain part of my body. Be that as it may, she almost drained me to the last drop. I couldn't take it anymore, no matter how hard she tried. "I don't want you to get too excited around Helen tonight and scare the poor thing," Jenny said. She then informed me that Helen would be joining me for dinner. "Johnny, this woman is in love with you, do you know? She's a great match, and you should look after her." "Come on, Jenny, I think Helen is looking in Frank's direction." "What's wrong with you? First you say she's in love with Harris, now she's in love with his partner. Johnny, she has a crush on you. I know I'm a woman." "Why are you so sure?" I asked, curious if she would say female intuition. "She told me while you were sedated. And also, she will bring her children today. She wants you to take a closer look at each other." Helen arrived at about 7:30. Dinner had to be early because of the children. But before eating, all 5 of us took a short walk around the hotel grounds and then went to the restaurant. Helen and her 2 girls were on their best behavior. I doubt they visited such luxurious places often. However, me too. I'm not used to unnecessary formalities. I had fun making fun of the overly prim waiter. The girls giggled, and Helen gave me the same look I remembered from Angela when I fooled around with the kids in public. I truly believe that with Aunt Jenny's help I was able to connect with the girls. Aunt Jenny provided me with suitable little gifts for them. "First impressions are important, especially with children and new relatives," she said. As I was giving the children their gifts, I discovered another small box in the bag. It contained a brooch for Helen, nothing special or expensive. It turns out Helen told Jenny she liked her when they went shopping together while I slept and my hospital stay was explained to the children. Officially, the dinner was to thank the children for allowing their mother to spend so much time with me at my hospital bed. Helen and the children didn't stay out late. After they left, Jenny declared the evening a success and insisted that we go to the bar and celebrate. "How did you understand that the children liked me?" I asked Jenny. "What, not like Superman, who jumped over the car in one leap? They were amazed. How could they not love you? God, if you get your kids back from Angela, you and Helen will have a full house. You will need a governess. Do you need to fill out my application for this position yet?" Jenny said with a triumphant intonation. "Come on, Jenny, I barely know Helen, and anyway, I didn't jump over the car in one fell swoop. I rather jumped and jumped away. It was only late at night that I realized that Jenny clearly had no intention of going home, and we went to bed. The night was long and interrupted by periods of activity. At about 10 in the morning, I received a call on a strange phone. Jenny wanted to come with me, but I refused to involve her in the matter. The journey to the warehouse took me almost 2 hours. When I arrived, the large door opened, and I was able to drive inside, keeping my car out of sight. One of my friends met me and took me through several other warehouses until we got to one that must have been right next to the river. Curtis' car was parked in the center of the warehouse. I was taken to a small office built against the wall on the riverside. "Hey, buddy," said the guy who organized all this as I entered the office. With him were two thugs who could scare anyone on a dark night. He's been sitting in the trunk since midnight. All this time, the guys discussed how they would get rid of his body. I think he'll tell us anything to get out of here alive. We checked that he won't be able to see you, but you will be able to hear him. We will check with you if we suddenly miss something. Okay, Marco, let's get started. Two thugs and my friend left the office. They walked up to the Mercedes, opened the trunk, and pulled out a terrified Curtis. My friends came up with, in my opinion, a rather strange plan to get the necessary information out of Curtis. But I guess the experts from Scotland Yard interviewed them all at one time, so these experts essentially trained them. They just usually ended up on the other side of the questions. "Okay, freak, where is he?" asked the first thug. "Who?" "I don't know who you're looking for," Curtis blurted out. I saw that the guy was trembling with fear. He did not know who these people were, but one look at them said that they were not at all like the criminals with whom he had dealt before. My friend, who had previously had his back to Curtis, turned and looked him straight in the eyes. "Where's Johnny Carpenter?" asked my friend with real anger in his voice. Curtis flinched from the question. He clearly expected to be asked about Simmons, but these guys were asking him about me. His face was distorted with complete confusion. "John Carpenter? I haven't seen him since his trial." Curtis finally lied. I don't think Curtis even realized where the punch came from. I only noticed the rapid movement of the second thug. Curtis doubled over as the wind was knocked out of him with a powerful blow to the stomach. "Don't you dare lie to the boss." The first thug growled. "Carpenter was in your office the other day. Why did he come?" Curtis, who had been staring at the size 9 boots just inches from his face, looked up at the brute. "I don't know why he came. I didn't talk to him." "Then why did he come?" asked the boss. "I told you, I don't know. He's probably hunting me because I snitched on him in court." "No fucking way," said Gorilla Number 1, lifting Curtis off the floor by his lapels. "You'd be feeding on fish at the bottom of this damn river by now if Johnny Carpenter really wanted your blood. So tell us, why the hell would Carpenter want an asshole like you?" The plan was to make Curtis think that these guys weren't looking for Simmons at all. If he thought they were looking for me, he might have revealed where Simmons was hiding, and that way he would have gotten himself out of whatever mess he was in. "I don't know. I told you, I just testified against him in court a couple of years ago. I thought this bastard was going to have a showdown with me. I got out of there as soon as I could. I haven't seen him since then." "Bullshit. If Johnny Carpenter had really been after you, you wouldn't have lived to see this conversation. Johnny Carpenter doesn't play games. So what did he want from you, and where did he go?" The boss asked the trembling Curtis. "I told you I didn't talk to him. I think he just wanted to scare me." "And why does he need this?" asked the boss. "Not sure. Maybe he's looking for his woman. She ran away from him, you know. Tell me more. If he's looking for her, that's probably where we'll find him. But why did he think you knew where she was?" "I don't know where she is. I think she ran off to the husband of the woman Carpenter killed. That's all I know," Curtis wheezed. Curtis sounded increasingly desperate. Moreover, Gorilla Number 2 took out a crowbar from somewhere and tapped it on his palm. Curtis stared at the instrument with concern. "I think he knows a lot more than he says, boss," said the second goon. "Let me teach him some respect." "How was it last time?" "That little bastard was too beat up to say anything after you worked with him," the first goon remarked. "Ah, I got a little carried away. Now I'll just break a couple of his bones. He will still be able to speak. Let's get it here," where I have a place. No, please, I don't know anything, honestly. Curtis almost shouted. By this point, he was already panicking. Don't lie to me, puppy, the boss said calmly but firmly. You obviously know about Carpenter's wife and who she ran off with. And this, by the way, is not such well-known information. So tell me where the hell you knew about this. Otherwise, both you and your damn car will rot at the bottom of the docks. Nobody will find you there. I was sure Curtis's eyes were going to pop out of their sockets as he looked around at all three men, and then he just fainted. He was carefully dropped to the floor. While the two thugs stood over him, the boss returned to my office. Every time that little bastard opens his mouth, he tells us something new, the boss said. I think by the end of this night, we will know everything he knows. I think we should first find out where Simmons is hiding, and then we'll deal with your setup. Fine? I'm surprised you only hit him once, I commented. It's nice to hit them, of course, but fear is a much more useful tool. Once you start beating them up, there's a risk that you'll accidentally hurt them enough to knock them unconscious, and then you're screwed. Bernie only applied it once, and the rest was the work of his imagination. The boss picked up a chair that was in the office and took it to where Curtis was lying. The two thugs lifted Curtis and sat him on a chair. Then one of them hit him in the face a couple of times. Curtis opened his eyes and looked around, as if not understanding where he was. Then it dawned on him that he was still in his worst nightmare. For a moment, I thought he would try to escape, but he changed his mind. So, you told me about the guy Carpenter's ex-lives with. Where can I find it? The boss asked threateningly. Honestly, I don't know. Somewhere near Southampton, I think. And why did you decide that? The boss asked much softer. I understood what he was getting at. The boss sounded almost friendly when Curtis answered questions. But if he didn't answer, the boss and the two thugs were terrifying. Curtis was silent for a few seconds, wondering if he should lie. Then, looking at the two thugs, he explained. Every now and then Simmons calls me and asks me to steal a car for him. I think he doesn't have the guts to steal it himself. I steal a car somewhere in the city and then leave it in a car park in Southampton for him to pick up. Why does he need stolen cars? I don't know, I'm not asking. He pays it forward, that's all I care about. But he definitely lives there somewhere, since he picks up cars from there. And the money usually comes to me by mail, with a Southampton postmark. Does he pay you in cash by mail? Yeah, he usually puts the money in a cassette tape or something, and then in a sealed, air-lined envelope. And how did he get you involved in stealing cars? I once worked for him, and since then he makes me steal cars for him from time to time. What kind of work have you done for him? Curtis looked again at the three thugs surrounding him. Look, since you don't like Simmons, it won't hurt you to know. Simmons framed Carpenter for the murder of his wife. I stole a bottle of champagne and a couple glasses from the hotel and gave them to Simmons. Then somehow he got Carpenter's prints on them and planted them in his wife's room the night of the murder. She always ordered champagne when she met her suitors at the hotel, so Simmons knew she would order it. I delivered the champagne when she called the front desk and told the police I saw Carpenter in her room. Who was in the room with her? No one when I delivered the champagne. There was never anyone there when she ordered it. Curtis fell silent, as if he was thinking about something. Although, I suppose someone could be hiding in the bathroom. She didn't invite me to stay that night. She usually made some hints. Have you ever accepted her proposals? Only once, when her boyfriend didn't seem to show up. Look, I was at work. I couldn't spend the whole night with her. It's just that her boyfriend didn't show up that night, so she waited until I finished my shift. Damn, this woman was a real sex machine. What about her suitors? Have you ever seen them? No way. I think that's why she used this place. There were no security cameras. Well, at least not then. I think her boyfriends were climbing the fire escape. She was right outside the window of the room she always rented. None of the hotel staff ever saw them. The boss stole a glance in my direction. He seemed to have run out of questions and was waiting to see if I had anything to add. Honestly, at that moment I couldn't think of anything. My thoughts were far from here. I tried to strain my memory and remembered that about a year before Mary Simmons was murdered, Angela's aunt, her only living relative, as far as I knew, had become so weak from old age that she had moved into a nursing home. The old lady had a house somewhere in the Dibden area, on the very edge of the New Forest. I had only been there once, but I vaguely remembered where this place was. I began to wonder if the old lady had died and if Angela had inherited the house. As far as I remembered, the house was quite isolated, just the right place to hide. No neighbors nearby, no random witnesses who could notice who comes and goes, and from there it's a stone's throw to Southampton. Suddenly, I realized that my boss friend was already standing next to me in the office. "Do you remember anything else?" he asked. "No, but I think I know where I can find Angela and my children. Can you keep an eye on this little bastard for a couple of hours while I check out a place in the New Forest? If he gets to the phone, Curtis can contact Simmons. Simmons isn't as dumb as that brat. He can put two and two together. Aren't you going to call the cops?" "No, I don't think so yet. It's just a guess, and if they send in the local cops, who knows what Simmons will do? He had killed before. He might panic and use my children as hostages or something like that. I want to get my kids before things start to get messy." But it seems that he had an ironclad alibi for the time of his wife's murder. Well, he paid that Curtis guy, who said that he did not pay those who confirmed his alibi. And then there was the thing with my friend's dad, and Simmons attacked me that night, remember? Keep an eye on this little bastard until I check out the place I'm thinking about. Then I noticed that Curtis was nowhere to be seen. Where is he anyway? The guys stuffed him back into the trunk of his car. He will be safe there for some time. I think he's already used to it. He spent most of the night there. But you won't go there alone. Me and Bernie are coming with you in case you get into trouble. Marco will keep an eye on this idiot. 10 minutes later, we were on our way. I called Gary as soon as we passed Winchester and told him I was heading to the house where I thought Angela and my kids were hiding. Gary wasn't happy and told me not to do anything stupid. He and Frank were already running after me before I even finished talking. But I had about an hour's head start, and he didn't know what car I was driving, so he couldn't alert the local cops. We parked about a mile from the house and waited until dark. Just in case, I turned off my cell phone so that Gary couldn't track my location using the signal. Bernie and the boss relaxed and drank from a flask. They said that over time you get used to remaining calm, waiting for the right moment to do something. The room seemed empty at first glance. I pushed the door very carefully to widen the gap and improve the view. I barely had time to notice a man's foot on the floor when everything around me plunged into darkness. As I slowly began to come to my senses, I found myself lying on the floor of the room I was trying to look into. A sharp pain in the back of my head made it clear that I had been hit on the head. How long I was unconscious, I had no idea. Gradually, my eyes focused on the motionless body lying in front of me. When my consciousness and vision finally cleared, I realized that it was Bill Simmons, and he was lying just a few steps away from me. I think I propped myself up on my elbow to get a better look at the body and make sure I wasn't mistaken he was dead. "Yes, John, he's dead." Angela's voice came from somewhere behind me. Stunned, I turned around and saw her sitting on the other side of the room with an automatic pistol in her hand. "What happened?" I asked, not knowing what exactly I was asking about Simmons or about the one who hit me. Or, more precisely, as the police will think you shot him," Angela answered. "Yes, I think it won't be difficult to convince them that you came here to take revenge on Bill for stealing your loving wife. You had a gun, and you were determined to kill us both. You shot Bill first, but unfortunately for you, he also had a gun on that table. I managed to get to him while you were fighting with Bill, and in a panic, I shot you in self-defense. This is not exactly how I originally planned everything, but the result is the same. You're both dead, and I won't have to orchestrate an accident for Bill later." I know Angela's words reached my foggy mind, but there was something else that was bothering me. "Where are the children, Angela?" I asked sharply. "Don't worry about them, John. They are in a good boarding school in Kent. completely safe and far away from here. You can't get away with killing Bill and me, Angela. Oh, I think it will do. I had enough time to think everything through. It's an automatic pistol, and as far as the police know, I've never fired one in my life. I'm going to fire a few random bullets around the room, randomly, like a scared woman. I've thought it over. One of these random bullets will kill you. Of course, it would be an accident, a poor, scared, defenseless housewife defending herself from a jealous, cruel, murderous husband who had already been convicted of murdering Mary Simmons. I think I can convince a jury of this, even if I can't convince the police. But why? Point of all this? Why did you have to kill Mary and frame me? You and Bill could just run away together. Oh, you never understood me, did you? I didn't care about Bill Simmons. To be honest, he wasn't very good in bed, I can assure you. Maybe that's why Mary cheated on him so often. You see, Johnny, I've always needed money. With all of Mary's money and yours, I can finally enjoy the life of my dreams somewhere in the south of France. So that's what it's all about, money. You and Simmons framed me and sent me to prison for 7 years just to get Macy's money. Sorry, dear, but yes, I was bored and wanted a luxurious life. There wasn't much point in eliminating you. With the money you had, I wouldn't be able to live the way I wanted. Suddenly, it dawned on me. If I had not hidden all the money abroad, I might have been the victim in the first place. Angela had always been a big spender, so I saved as much as I could to avoid arguments about her extravagance. You know, at one point I actually thought about taking out a large insurance policy on you, John, Angela continued. But I was pretty sure it would have raised suspicions among the police if you suddenly turned up dead. And then poor dumb Bill started hitting on me. You know, he had nothing. Everything was Mary's money, so it was not difficult to persuade him. So you planned everything. Yes, you didn't think Bill would have had the brains or the guts to kill Mary, did you? Oh my God, Angela, did you kill Mary Simmons? Damn, were you the one who killed Sheila Thomas and George Caffrey? And you were the one who tried to run me over with your car that evening. That's why I couldn't see the driver, you were so low in the seat. Yes, the girls at school always called me Shorty. You understand that you won't be able to get away with it this time, Angela. By then, I was already stalling for time. I assumed the boss and Bernie were somewhere nearby. I don't know why, but I had a strong feeling that they were behind the door in the corridor. The problem was that Angela was sitting on the other side of the room, away from the door, pointing a gun at me. Oh, I think it will be so. John Carpenter, a convicted murderer, is released from prison and pursues his ex-wife and her new lover. I can already see the headlines in the Sunday newspapers. I believe I will be able to get my hands on the rest of the money you have left after the divorce. After all, your children are your direct heirs, and also all of Mary's money, which that idiot Bill deposited in Swiss bank accounts. I have all the numbers and passwords, by the way. Angela waved the piece of paper she was holding in her other hand. Bill was hopeless at paperwork. I think I have enough for a comfortable life, thank you. There's one thing I don't understand, Angela. Why did you wait until I got out of prison? Why didn't you and Simmons run away and hide while I was behind bars? Honey, Bill was a stupid idiot. That's one of the things I never doubted about you. Except for the moment when I married you. I interrupted her. Wow, that's not very kind of a loving husband, John, Angela said with a strange smile on her face. In any case, I knew that one day you would find me. You're not stupid, although it was pretty stupid to come here alone. I had no intention of spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for you to one day stand behind me. I knew that if I tried to move or stand up, Angela would probably shoot right away. I needed to somehow distract her and get her to talk long enough for the boss and Bernie to realize what was going on and hopefully do something about it. I touched the back of my head and felt the large lump where I assumed Angela had hit me and knocked me out. Lord, girl, what did you hit me with? I asked, continuing to feel my head. A wooden rolling pin, the usual weapon of a housewife. Remember, I'm just a scared housewife who married a crazy killer. What was that? Angela asked, hearing a noise outside the window. This was my signal to be ready. I realized that the boss, or Bernie, was trying to distract Angela's attention. Suddenly, the entire window shattered. As it later turned out, the boss and Bernie threw a garden bench at him. I tried to dive behind the sofa, but almost at the same moment Angela fired in my direction. The damn bullet must have gone through the armrest of the sofa and hit me tangentially in the head, although I didn't even feel the impact. I only have a vague memory of someone I later learned to be Gary shouting, "Armed police, drop your weapon or I'll shoot." Then all hell broke loose and many shots were fired, seemingly from all directions. Then silence. I'm not sure if I was unconscious, but for a while I lost track of what was happening. Suddenly, I heard the boss's voice. "Johnny, are you okay?" I opened my eyes and saw him leaning over me. "Don't move." "You're wounded in the head," he said, examining my wound. "Oh, don't panic. It looks like it's just a scratch." "The ambulance is on its way." "Angela?" I asked. "She's dead, John." "I'm afraid I had to shoot her," said Gary's voice. "Sorry, Gary," I said, knowing that killing people was not what he joined the police for. "I've received weapons training, John. I have a permit to carry a pistol, and I always knew that there was a possibility that one day I would have to shoot. But I never thought it would be a woman. Damn, this is going to be a terrible mess. I had to use your friend's gun." "Look, you two better get out of here before the locals show up," Gary said to the boss and Bernie. "We'll have to come up with some kind of story about how I found these weapons in the house. Hell, I should actually arrest you for possessing it. Do you know what this is? 5 years in prison." The boss and Bernie looked at each other and nodded. "And if that damn gun turns out to be involved in any other crimes, I'll get you both." "Don't worry. It's clean. I bought it myself in the States last year," the boss replied. Then, taking the keys to my car, they instantly disappeared from the house. "What a damn mess," Gary said, turning his attention back to me. He examined my wound and confirmed that it was just a scratch. The ambulance and local police seemed to take forever to arrive. In some ways, it was for the best because it gave Gary, Frank, and I time to put our statements together. Gary heard everything Angela said. It was his presence that I felt behind the door. It turns out that Curtis somehow escaped. Marco, the guy who was supposed to be guarding him, called his boss and warned that Curtis might contact Simmons. So the boss, thinking the situation was getting out of control, used my cell phone, which I left in the car, to call Gary and Frank. It turned out that Gary had a damn good memory. Having learned that I was heading to the Southampton area to find Angela, he remembered her mentioning that her only living relative lived in the New Forest. This was during the interrogation for the murder of Mary Simmons. Apparently, when I was arrested, Gary told Angela to call a relative to support her, and then she said that her only relative lived in a nursing home somewhere there. In any case, this was enough for Gary and Frank to head to the New Forest area. As luck would have it, they were nearby when the boss called them. Boss and Bernie were already in the house and noticed Angela sitting with a gun in her hand and pointing it at my unconscious body before Gary and Frank arrived. Gary was prepared to go in unarmed, but the boss, at the risk of being arrested for simply possessing an illegal weapon, offered Gary his gun. I don't know if Gary or I will ever understand what the boss did for us that day. The boss is a notorious career criminal, well known in certain circles in London. Taking an illegal gun and handing it over to a cop for his own protection and mine would probably mean serious jail time for the boss. However, Gary, for his own reasons, decided not to push the issue further. Luckily, several other guns were found in the house during a police search. They were all connected to Angela in one way or another. They were hidden among her clothes and belongings, so no one really questioned how Gary got the gun that was allegedly found in the kitchen. I was taken to the hospital, where I spent the night and had several stitches placed on the wound on my head. Helen and Jenny visited me there and scolded me for going after Angela and Simmons alone. We managed to avoid the press when I left the hospital. So some time passed and things calmed down a bit before the journalists found out where the cottage was located. They reappeared at the time of the investigation, but soon lost interest in it. However, they were a damn burden when I faced my toughest task. I needed to take my girls out of that boarding school and tell them their mother was dead. It was made even more difficult by Angela and Simmons telling them I was dead. The fact that the girls hated that damn school made it a little easier. But nevertheless, I don't know if I could have done it without the help of Helen and Jenny, and also without the help of the local police, who kept the press and onlookers away from the cottage as much as possible. The boss provided what he called security, and that also proved useful, especially near the local school when the kids started going there. Jenny, who by then lived in my house, became something of a governess for my children, and for Helen's children too when she came to visit us. The Court of Appeal overturned my murder conviction surprisingly quickly. Either way, it was necessary before I could regain custody of my children. Gary's testimony about what Angela said that day was crucial. Curtis has disappeared, as if he has evaporated, but Gary is sure that he will appear again. Either way, this bastard should answer to the law for obstruction of justice and perjury. Gary isn't sure he can prove accessory to murder for stealing the cars Angela used. Things had cooled between Jenny and me by then, but sometimes she would still sneak into my room at night when the kids were already asleep. However, over time, it became clear that Jenny had another suitor, and the feeling was clearly mutual. Bert, one of the police officers on duty at the hotel, began visiting her in a patrol car and drinking coffee with her. Jenny says that until all the children are old enough, she will not accept Bert's marriage proposal. Hell, she even refused to go out with him until her divorce was officially finalized. Oh, and she never specified how old the kids had to be considered old enough. After that conversation with the boss, I stood by the pond for a long time, holding that same piece of paper in my hands. The sun slowly rose above the horizon, coloring the water in golden pink tones. The paper seemed heavier than it should be, as if it carried the weight of all the decisions made and not yet made. Mary Simmons's money. What would she say if she knew how her story ended? I put the piece of paper in my inner coat pocket and headed home. Helen met me on the porch with a cup of coffee in her hand. Her hair was tousled by the wind, and her eyes shone with a soft light, the kind of light that you only see in people who have found peace. She smiled, noticing my confusion. "You're early today. Did something happen?" "No," I lied. "It was just a strange morning." We were sitting on the veranda when the children woke up. Their laughter echoed through the garden, and for a moment everything seemed perfect the way it should be. Weeks passed, then months. The sheet with the account numbers remained hidden in the safe behind the books on the top shelf in the office. Sometimes I would take it out, look at it, and put it away again, as if it were some kind of damned artifact. Helen didn't ask questions, but she knew that something was weighing on me. One evening, when the children were already asleep, she came up to me. The light from the lamp cast soft shadows on her face. "You don't have to explain anything to me," she said. "But if this is what keeps you up at night, maybe it's time to do something about it." I was silent. How do you explain to the person you love that you have a fortune in your hands, but every penny of this fortune smells of dirt, blood, and fear? That night, I decided to take action. The transfers began slowly and carefully. Small amounts that were dissolved in different funds in accounts under fictitious names. Money didn't bring joy, rather, it brought relief like a heavy load that you finally shift from one shoulder to another. Helen and I bought a bigger house, an old mansion with wide windows, and a garden in which roses always bloomed. The children went to a good school, and their faces glowed with joy when they returned home. Sometimes I thought about the boss. Is he still alive? What is he doing now? But these thoughts came less and less often. Angela. Her face sometimes appeared in my memory. She looked like a ghost from another time, from another life. Her secrets, her games. All this now seemed distant, like a dream. Life went on. Slowly, step by step, we built it again. Safe, quiet, and most surprisingly happy. One winter morning, as snow blanketed our garden in white, Helen came to me with a cup of tea. "Are you happy?" she asked. "Yes," I answered, looking at the children playing outside the window. "I'm happy." The sheet with the Swiss account numbers was still in the safe. But now he was just a piece of paper from the past, which no longer had power over me. Life goes on, and sometimes she is surprisingly kind to those who decided to give her a second chance. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even click to the next one.